This presentation is a production of the California Department of Toxic Substances Control. The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are not necessarily those of the California Department of Toxic Substances Control.
And one day, Jess Huff called me in and introduced me to a bunch of people from the Attorney General's office and said, we have to take over running a site.
There was this old barrier dam. They excavated out this whole area.
There's a notch in the hill. This is not
So we hastily put together a team of people and took over operation of the treatment plant and all the wells at the site that pump water to the treatment plant.
So then we have, 45 wells up in this area, pumping out this water that's seeped into the rock.
We are treating 120,000 gallons a day from 4 streams.
There's gravel drains, there's French drains, there's pump barrels, and other things to intercept groundwater and surface water that flows to the site so as to keep it from getting into the site.
We did effectively take over that site. We moved it much further along than anybody had.
We, in our department, were making these contacts with the community in a very different way from the way they had been communicated with by other regulatory agencies.
The whole idea was to provide information to them early on, ask them for their input.
The fact that we placed a higher priority on that site and began to do the various studies that needed to be done really did make a difference.
So there was a TCE plume that migrated generally down this contour. This is the plume map. So we've just about controlled that. As you go up the canyon, we have barrier extraction systems.
So right at the site, there's a barrier of wells that creates a low spot on the groundwater. The water drains into this, we pump it up, and that's the water that goes to our treatment plant. Mid-canyon, there's another series of 8 groundwater extraction wells. These create another low spot. Water drains into that low spot, it's pumped to the treatment plant. Right at the Highway 60, there's yet another barrier, and we had wells in the center of the plume. And as a result of pumping those wells since 1990, the TCE plume, which was really the critical concern of the community, has been largely mitigated.
I think, by the time DTSC was on board, that we had gone through an awful lot.
The really key element was to have them have a say.
The early years, there was a real perception that the community had no business in the middle of these decisions. They were technical decisions, and regular people didn't know what they were talking about.
And they pulled together. We took care of that site, and within a year, we went from the most despised people probably in the town of Glen Avon to probably the most appreciated and welcome people.
We were able at least to start to convince the populace that we cared and were interested in trying to address it. Although I think they're still trying to address it. Some of these things take many, many years, but we put it on to an organized basis.
In 1998, it was predicted we'll have an El Nino year, where we expect to have one of the highest recorded rainfalls in the Southern California area. And there was still problems up in the site with groundwater coming to the surface and exiting the site through the surface ditches. The state drilled 60 wells, 60 days in a crash program to install additional extraction capacity in the wells. And as a result, we went through the 98 record rainfall period with no surface seeps, and I think it was a significant turning point in getting the community to feel comfortable with the state as the operator of the site.
In 2000, we found perchlorate. The perchlorate plume that seems to be coming from the site is fairly well contained and follows Pyrite Creek all the way down to the river. Since we've been monitoring for perchlorate since 2000, we've seen significant reduction in perchlorate levels in this area where we have pumping wells.
The new treatment facility has to have much higher standards because one of the estimates of time frame for cleanup for these legacy sites are very difficult at best. Unfortunately, the only remedies we have in place for these sites is containment, and we will be containing these sites for hundreds of years.
I think that the folks who built the acid pits were just as smart as we are. They were doing the best for the knowledge at their time.
That's kind of the story of Stringfellow. It was probably a noble cause in the beginning, in that we had to have some place to put all these waste. Okay, we thought, based on the technology at that time, that here, a hard rock mine, basically an open pit mining operation, would be an excellent place, because
this was all mostly ag for the most part, up in this granitic canyon, and it looks like solid granite rock, and it's hot and dry, and this stuff all evaporates, right?
So, but as it worked out, that wasn't the case.
I've seen the damage that has been done. There's been some really severe health problems. I've lost friends directly from this. And it just was not necessary. And I think that's what drives us to continue the work we're doing today is it's not necessary. That all of this damage that we see at these various sites are preventable. And it's just a matter of making the right decisions and not the most convenient decisions.
There's, I think, a very significant value in community involvement. I mean, it's a site cleanup issue is not just a technical kind of pump and treat kind of issue or a muck and truck kind of issue. It involves property values, it involves people's perception of risks, it involves reuse of the land, and just a whole bevy of other issues that has to be taken into account in trying to develop a good solution.
The problems that occurred at Stringfellow occurred not on DTSC's watch. What happened at Stringfellow is not happening again. Now that DTSC has matured, its site mitigation program is able to take enforcement action and manage NPL caliber sites like BKK very successfully.
Many times I would cringe when the phone would ring and it would be Penny, because I knew that I was going to have to be accountable and answer hard questions. But she was doing her job, and that's the way it was.